If you had to distill down your investing philosophy into just a few words, what would that be? And it doesn't have to be just a few words. You can kind of expand on that. But just what is your kind of overarching philosophy and approach?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we emphasize quite a bit. Like we talk a lot about second derivative and inflection points, and I think it kind of goes along with the idea that markets are fluid and cognitive biases have been proven for a reason. People have anchoring biases or recency biases where they are really hoping to cling to some recent data or a pattern and extrapolate that out in the future. And while that's certainly like meaningful, obviously if it were that easy, everybody would be able to invest. So really paying attention and kind of being hyper focused on those second derivative changes is I think really paramount for us. And in our case, we predominantly focus on earnings, changes to earnings and the income statement, but it's really applicable to whatever area you would like. I think integrating the macro as well as the behavioral dynamics, overlaying those on top of a bottom-up driven philosophy is unique. It requires some more work and effort and skill set, but I think that gives us a differentiated process. As I've discussed sort of ad nauseum, I think having that macro understanding and capability, not to mention having some ability to observe the market in an era where I think policies are, this pendulum is shifting pretty aggressively. I think those three pillars integrated together correctly are really powerful. And lastly, it seems kind of silly to have to say, but just working hard. I think a lot of, not say everybody, but I think a lot of people, this idea of like we have the perfect template and a process, to me, it's that ends up becoming pretty static if you really believe. And we've seen investors who, I think value investors are just as smart as growth investors, but we've talked about this. So back in 2010, when they'd had their first kind of bad 12 months in a decade, I'm sure most of them said, look at the last decade, buy the dip. We believe in what we do. We still believe in intrinsic value. And they just weren't willing to acknowledge like that the Fed had, basically the referees had completely changed the rules of the game. And so yeah, I think having that flexibility and working hard at that and it kind of ties in with the tinkering and the flexibility and everything else. But that's really important. But yeah, I mean, I love to use the sports analogy of like, if you were a coach and you have a team and you're just gonna say, hey, these are my best 5 players, and we're putting them out on the field no matter what. I guess let's say the best 10 because it's probably football or soccer, no matter what, irrespective of the conditions. And then you're another coach who says, well, of course, if the dimensions of the field are different, or if it's raining, or if it's cold, or if my opponent is fast or opponent is slow, of course you're going to change your strategy. It'd be absurd not to. And yet when you think about how people invest who just are so dogmatic and they see that as a badge of honor, I think it's a massive mistake, because you're just essentially saying, I'm going to put the same 9 guys on the baseball field irrespective of all these other variables, and it makes no sense. It's lazy.